They say judges are made of marble, but that morning I bled, right there on the bench. A red line sliding past my eyebrow while a decorated detective, Grant Kincaid, raised my own gavel like it was a hammer and I was a nail, and for a heartbeat the whole courtroom forgot to breathe. Cameras blinking, gallery frozen, and a 17-year-old kid in chains finally lifted his head as if he'd just seen the world tilt in his favor for the first time in 8 months. Let me back up a sec. I'm Judge Mara Ellison, and if you've ever wondered what it feels like when a system pretends it's bigger than the law, when a badge tries to smother the Constitution, well, yeah, that happened in courtroom 6A at 9:05 a.m., with the sun pouring in like stage lights and the smell of old oak and cold brass thick as memory. Micah Reed was the reason we were all there. A kid with an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too big and a mother, Tanya, clutching a chewed-up manila folder like it was a life raft, and I mean that literally. Her thumb had worried a groove into the tab from months of waiting rooms and the soft-voiced cruelty of "not today, ma'am." The charges read like template nonsense. Gang recruitment, look out. Behavior consistent with criminal activity. Words stretched so thin you could hold them up to the light and see daylight right through. You know what I mean? But they'd been enough to cage him without bail, and the report was stamped with a name I'd been circling in red on sticky notes for half a year. Detective Grant Kincaid. I'd seen Kincaid's pattern long before Micah's file slid across my desk. The vague citations, the phantom informants who never materialized. That phrase, aggressive posturing, applied to kids who had the nerve to look him in the eye. And there was the part that sat in my ribs like a stone. 2 years earlier, Micah's older brother, Jordan, had been killed on a so-called split-second decision by the same officer. The official version read like a training manual: weapon recovered, threat neutralized. Case closed, but buried in a draft I wasn't supposed to have was a line so cold it burned. Subject appeared to be surrendering when engagement began. I don't forget sentences like that. They make a home in you. So I started tugging the threads, and the more I pulled, the more it unraveled. Arrest rosters, race breakdowns, GPS pings that didn't match sworn statements. All of it feeding into late-night meetings with Special Agent Sloan Rivera from the FBI's Civil Rights Division, a woman with a tired smile and a spine like rebar. She'd been hunting Kincaid longer than I had. 16 months tracking a network that reached past Denver into Wyoming and New Mexico. Whisper trails and missing footage and supervisors who could make complaints evaporate with a phone call. The twist, because every story like this has one, was that we didn't need a sting in a parking garage. We needed Kincaid to put the mask on himself, under oath, under lights, with the whole room listening. So when he pushed through my doors that morning, broad-shouldered and decorated and absolutely certain the room belonged to him, I kept my voice cool as water. "Detective, please explain the evidence justifying 8 months without bail." He leaned back like he was settling into his throne and served the speech he'd polished 100 times. High-risk zones. Confidential intelligence. Community protection. His baritone aimed at the rows of cameras like a campaign ad. Then I slid the coffee shop footage across, time-stamped and boring. The best kind of truth. Micah hunched over calculus while Kincaid's report had him posted as a lookout miles away on the same morning. A muscle ticked in his jaw. We widened the lens. 80-plus juvenile arrests in 5 years. 85% Black or Latino. Neighborhoods that were diverse on paper, but somehow monochrome in his reports. He said he didn't count by race. I said his numbers had done it for him. It's a strange skill, listening for the hairline crack in a person's performance. He had tells, right foot tapping, tiny pauses, a smile that arrived a beat too late. When I asked how he defined aggressive posturing, he said context-dependent, which is courtroom code for anything I want it to be. And a murmur rolled through the gallery, that low civic thunder when people realize they've been seeing something crooked out of the corner of their eye for years. Then I said a name I hadn't said in that room before: Jordan Reed. His eyes flashed. "Justified," he snapped, before I even finished the question, and in the back row Agent Rivera didn't move at all. Not even her pen, but I could feel the temperature drop. "Exhibit 47, I said, and the speakers coughed up static, and then the old, unguarded Kincaid, laughing with Captain Doug Renner. Casual as a backyard beer. "I've got the younger one where I want him. No bail. No timetable. Mom keeps her mouth shut after that. Those coffee shop cameras were a pain. I planted enough to make it stick, took care of body cam myself. The sound didn't boom, it sliced. Clean and thin, through wood and light and breath. Tanya's hand tightened on that folder until the tab bent. Kincaid stared at me and tried the last refuge of men who've never had to answer to anyone. Maybe the audio was altered. I let the silence do the work while every lens in the room drank in the sweat at his temple. The FBI's lab had done their job. The tape was real. What about the other families? The recording asked itself, and his voice answered. The watch lists, the pull them in for anything strategy, the way a house can drown in tickets and bail before it ever sees a courtroom. Here's the part that nobody teaches you in law school. How to hold a room in that precise second after a mask falls and before the mob forms. I recessed for counsel to review, rapped the gavel once. And that's when Kincaid stood, the chair legs screaming across the floor, the bailiff adjusting his stance like a spring. You think you've won? He said, low and mean. And when I told him to sit, he reached out, took the gavel like it was his birthright, and brought it down on my forehead. It didn't drop me, marble. Remember, but it staggered the world just enough for the agents to clear the distance, for Rivera to rise without hurrying, for steel to click around wrists that had never met it from that side before. Assault on a federal judicial officer, civil rights deprivation, conspiracy, the full chorus, and he spat the old line about calls being made, and Rivera, God bless her, said go ahead, make them. Every number you trust is in custody. While he was walked out into a storm of microphones and blue lights, the rest of the plan unfolded like clockwork across 3 states, sealed warrants unsealed. Safes opened, servers cloned, cash ledgers seized from neat suburban dens and small-town corner offices that smelled like lemon cleaner and old lies. By nightfall, the first wave count was a number I'll never forget because we argued about whether to say it out loud. 72 officers, 9 prosecutors. 3 chiefs, people who had learned to call their choices policy and their quotas safety. The network didn't collapse with drama. It sagged under the weight of its own paperwork. Money trails and private security, consulting fees, and bail kickbacks, the grubby spreadsheet version of injustice. Here's what people always ask me later. Was that the satisfying part? The cuffs. The perp walks, the headlines. I won't lie. There's a bead in your chest that steadies when power has to answer under the same fluorescent lights it turned on other people. But satisfaction for me came 2 days later, when Micah walked out of county thinner and quieter and somehow taller. Charges dropped with prejudice, his mother shivering in June heat. That manila folder finally light in her arms. It came again the afternoon I saw the first policy memos roll through, automatic detention curbed, body cam tampering treated like what it is. A felony with teeth, civilian review boards with actual bite. And it came a year down the line when I watched Micah, in a gown and a gold stole. That smile that starts in the eyes. Tell a gym full of families that he was headed to law school because nobody else's kid should have to memorize the sound of boots in a concrete hallway. I'm not naive. Corruption doesn't vanish because you knock out a few keystones. It retreats, learns, looks for a shadow. But light changes a room. Agent Rivera kept the pressure on with quarterly reports and the kind of oversight that makes people groan until it saves their nephew. Tanya took her grief and built the Jordan Reed Foundation. And if you think a mother with a ledger and a phone tree can't move a city hall agenda, you haven't seen the right mother get mad in public. As for Grant Kincaid, he'll only ever see a courtroom now in shackles. His citations read back to him in the register that doesn't blink, his name turned into shorthand in casebooks and lectures. The cautionary tale nobody wants to be. If you're waiting for me to say it's all fixed, no, that wouldn't be honest. The scar above my eyebrow reminds me every morning that the bench isn't a fortress. It's a seat at a long table where the people come to be heard, and sometimes the people banging the loudest insist they are the law. The truth is simpler and harder. The law is only as alive as the folks willing to carry it, to ask for body cam footage, to file the records request, to show up on a Tuesday night and say their piece while a board council member pretends to read the agenda. You don't need a robe for that, or a badge. You need a spine and a folder and neighbors who answer texts. So here's where I leave you, with one last image and one open door. The courthouse steps at dusk, the city humming. Micah and Tanya standing beside me, the crowd thinned but stubborn, and somewhere a bus brake sighs and a kid on a scooter laughs. and for a second the air feels clean. Like maybe we bought the room a little time. And then a cruiser rolls past at the light, windows up, and I wonder, the way any honest person wonders, who's sitting inside. What choices they'll make when nobody is filming. What we'll do, all of us, if the shadows start to lengthen again. You tell me. Because this part isn't mine alone. Was the system corrected or just embarrassed? Did we deliver justice or a warning? Are we building something or patching leaks until the next storm? If you've got a thought about right and wrong here, about power and community and what it takes to keep the lights on, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story so it doesn't get buried. Drop your take in the comments. Argue with me if you have to, because silence is where rock grows. Like, subscribe, pass it along to that one friend who swears nothing ever changes. Then tell me,